listeners, to the BizBlend Podcast with your host Sana, where business meets brilliance, heart meets hustle, and strategy fuels success. Now, today in this episode, we are diving deep into a topic that I haven't discussed yet in so many of my conversations on BizBlend. And also, this topic hits every leader where it counts: the hidden cost of employee turnover. But more importantly, this is the question that can be posed all the time. How do we quantify this? What can we do to turn the tide? And to help me answer these questions, joining is Francie Jain. Let me share a bit about Francie with all of you. She's the founder and CEO of Terawatt, which is a game-changing B2B marketplace that's reshaping how companies tackle turnover by making expert coaching accessible and impactful. Now, with over a decade of experience empowering leaders and organizations, Francie believes that thriving businesses are built on the foundations of success and well being of individuals, people. And through Terawatt, she is helping companies reduce turnover, unlock potential, and retain millions in revenue that would otherwise just slip through the cracks. So, listeners, get ready to explore the numbers behind turnover, the solutions we often unintentionally ignore or maybe overlook, and how you can transform your organization's culture and the bottom line. So, Francie, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Sana. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay. Francie, let's start with the basics. Okay, what exactly, how do you define and then quantify employee turnover in a way that really resonates with the leadership teams? What kind of numbers should we actually be looking at?
Yeah. So, one of the things that's really interesting is employee turnover really varies among verticals. It really depends on where you're working. Like a really interesting statistic is like fast food companies have a really high turnover rate, like 60 or 70%, just because you have a lot of teenagers working there. And people are doing the jobs for, a few months at a time, and they're not expecting to stay very long. It's not a career necessarily, although for some people it could be. Um, I always follow the hospital space, and that's about 20% turnover, which I think is pretty high. Um, the first thing is definitely to benchmark and just understand like what your vertical looks like and what sort of average, because I think that it's kind of like what they say, it's unfair to make a fish walk or whatever the expression. But I mean, you can't it's hard to do something that's like completely out of your realm of potential. So I think it's important just to understand like what's normal, what's above average, what's below average. Because with this kind of area, I think having a lower turnover than the average is a huge benefit. So even just knowing the like relative numbers are great. Um, yeah. So one of the other things that people don't do, they don't quantify turnover. So often when they talk about turnover, they think about it as one person. Okay, well, if this person leaves, we have to pay maybe a headhunter or a website or whoever you're paying to refill the spot. You're paying for the onboarding and you're paying for them to kind of get effective. And how long, then you have to estimate how long does it take them to be effective at their job. So those are probably like the three main ways to quantify it. And I would call those like the direct costs. And then there are the indirect costs. So again, like for the hospital space, it might be something like error rate, um, patient satisfaction rate, culture of safety. Those are all things that are measured in hospitals. So those are things you also want to be measuring, right? So if there's a high turnover rate, and if it's higher than average, or even if it's just average, some of these metrics for the organization are likely not good either. So as you reduce the turnover rate, the organizational effectiveness goes up. And that's a clear relationship that's proven in the research. And that's the same thing for burnout as well.
Hmm. That is concerning yet, to a very, very address to. Also, Fratzi, you mentioned that for a 500 employee company, turnover could cost over, okay, $4 million annually. That is staggering. So, can you break down where that figure comes from and how leaders can identify their own hidden costs?
Yeah. So I don't have a spreadsheet in front of me, but these are the things to think about.
Mhm.
When people quantify turnover, there's this wide range in cost and what it costs to hire a new person. So
Mhm.
sometimes people will say, oh, it's about 30% of their salary to hire a new person. Other people will say it's multiples of the person's salary to hire another person.
Mhm.
So that's a wide range. So you have to also be like thoughtful about what you're actually spending your money on. So in like I used to work in finance, and in finance, a lot of jobs are hired through headhunters.
Mhm.
And headhunters will take, I think it's like, yeah, like 30% or something of the first year salary of the employee.
Mm.
But then there are other places where if you're just going on a website, that's obviously going to be a lot lower expense. But then you're also probably paying the person less if you're hiring off a website.
Uh-huh.
So that direct expense you have to think about. When the numbers get really high, oftentimes what's happening is it's not just the hiring cost, but it's also the replacement cost. So, like, what are you doing if there's no person in that spot? So, for anyone that has to get temporary work or pay overtime, that can make that could start to get very expensive, and that's when those numbers come in. And that's again, like I spend a lot of time looking at hospitals, and I can tell you this incredible case study
Uh-huh.
where they had it was in Colorado, a state, in the western, the mountain part of the U.S. And they had 4,500 employees in a health system. So it was hospitals and doctor's offices and all sorts of things. And they had a 24% turnover rate. And that was higher than the 20% average in hospitals. And because they were in a smaller town, they were like, this is unsustainable because we're running out of people. I mean, people just aren't moving to this town. So we have to be really careful about what our turnover rate looks like. So they brought in group coaching that was kind of looking at psychological safety and bringing it more to the space and to help their employees collaborate more. And it was optional.
Mhm.
And every year, they were able to lower the employee turnover rate so that after 9 years, it got to 4% from 24%. So huge reduction.
Yes.
And then what it turned out is that the difference between 24% turnover and 4% turnover, because they had 4,500 employees, it was $33 million a year. And that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You don't need me to tell you that. But the point is that you could build a new fancy building every year for $33 million. So if you have that much revenue that now and things are functioning better in your organization, that's a lot of cash to a lot of choices, right? You could pay people more, you could give bonuses, you could buy more equipment. It just gives you many more choices on how to run your business. And I think, and that's what the point I'm trying to make is that every the turnover numbers can be different for everyone, but
Mhm.
it's so dramatic when it starts to come down because it's not just that, like, it's not like you have the same problems and you've lower turnover, you have fewer problems and you've lower turnover. So it's not a negative in any way. And it's really kind of investment in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. That absolutely makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. And that's really a great example to show the effectiveness, the importance, statistically or in terms of numbers. And also, Francie, we have seen a huge, paradigm shift in terms of the trends in employment, post pandemic. We saw quiet quitting, we saw quiet firing. We are seeing, you know, from remote to RTO shifts right now. How all these factors are affecting the employee turnover here? Because honestly, to me, that doesn't quite get along with the positive
Yeah.
side. Yeah, and what's
That's
your
a yeah, it's a really good question. I
Mhm.
think that the I kind of think it has to do with how it's done, right? If return to work is done as a way to dominate people and to see who's really going to stick around and who wants it the
Mhm.
most,
Mhm.
as a way to kind of cull people who who leaders think aren't doing well, I think that's going to lead to more employee turnover. I think that if it's done really thoughtfully, and the idea is bringing people in because you are creating um, reasons to go into the office or reasons to collaborate in person that really make sense, and that may even have quantitative, um, what's like data behind it. Like a company might say, we found that we're much more innovative when we're in person. So we're going to try to replicate that and measure it. And people, I think, would respond to that. I think it's more that when leaders sound like toddlers or they're having a tantrum, they're just saying, everyone needs to be back in the office because I want it that way. Like that doesn't lead to a lot of trust among employees. And I think that's the kind of thing where people start to leave because they say, you're not paying me enough for this kind of, to deal with this kind of stuff. And then they will leave for small amounts of money. And I think that that's like a big misunderstanding in the workforce is that it's often easier to say when you're leaving than getting paid more. And so people think, oh, we just can't afford to pay more. But really, what it is I think most employees just think, well, it's probably the same stuff I'm dealing with here, but at least I get paid more. And whereas if instead the organization was better run and had better culture and people felt like they were able to make a difference and they felt like they were treated with respect, I don't think the money would matter that much.
I agree.
Um, so that's just my take. Yeah.
Mm, I absolutely agree with that. Okay, now let's talk about Terawatt, Francie. So, how exactly Terawatt's group coaching model differ from the traditional one-on-one coaching, and why do you think it is particularly effective in reducing the turnover rates?
Yeah. So the main thing is that when most people think about executive coaching or professional development, well, especially executive coaching, people think about it as a one-on-one activity, right? And the idea is like, one executive coach works with one employee and they really talk about barriers and plans and how to meet goals. And that's what we're doing as well in the group setting. Obviously, the difference is that instead of 1-to-1, it will be like 1-to-5 or 1-to-10 or 1-to-20. But the reason that's interesting is because you still get the one expert, but you split that expert's cost by the 5, by the 10, or by the 20, or by 40, however many people you have in the session. And so you can do that online or you can do it in person. And the idea is that you're bringing the insights that typically only the leaders of the organization have, because they're the ones who can afford the one on one time of these experts. But if you're able to take those same experts and bring it to the middle chunk of the organization, then the middle people know the same things that the leaders know, and you're more likely to be firing in all cylinders. And and so that's like a excuse me, a change from what typically happens or typically how people think about coaching. At Terawatt, we're kind of like a matchmaker. Another way to think of us is like Airbnb for executive coaching. And so what we're really doing is we have three stakeholders. We have executive coaches and other kinds of coaches and experts, people who are professors at universities or PhDs. Some people are just wildly talented and aren't that educated. And so we're just looking for talented people all over the place. And so that's what our coaches are. They're vetted through us. Then the second stakeholder is the employer, the who is buying the coaching on behalf of their employees. The employees are the third stakeholder. And so what we're doing is always setting up each of these three groups for success. And no one of these groups is disadvantaged in any way. So we're a pure marketplace. That's why the Airbnb analogy often works for people, is that we just make a percentage commission from that match. We don't mark up the coach's rate. And so what that means is that we're able to get better coaches. We're able to get true experts because they're telling us what their market rate is. We don't tell them what we pay. And that's a huge difference between really almost everyone in the coaching space.
Mm. It's empowering from both the ends, not just one end. So that's quite interesting, Francie. And let me put a bit of a contradictory perspective here. Um, some leaders would argue here, um, it's not coming from me, but still, I would like to keep this point here that turnover isn't always a bad thing. It's more of kind of refreshing the talent pool and then bringing in new ideas. So, how do you reconcile this perspective with your mission to reduce turnover?
Yeah, that's true, 100%. I mean, it's not like these organizations are tenure track. I mean, you can also do that by firing people that aren't working out. Um, so I think in a way that might be true, but the problem is if there is an organization where psychological safety is low or other problems are being seen, your talented people are leaving just as much as your untalented people. And so what you want is to keep the talented people. And at some point, every organization maxes out of money they can pay the talented people. So how are you going to keep the talented people around? And they want to work in organizations where they're respected and people are really just doing the work and there's not a lot of politics and there's not a lot of drama uh,
Mhm.
and conflict, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's not a wrong thing to say it's good to have ideas. I agree with that, but think about it this way: like, what if you could have still new, fresh ideas, and everyone knows their job really well, and they're all really motivated every day?
Mm.
That's just an incredible place to work. I mean, that's what everyone wants, I think. And, one way I was talking to somebody about this the other day, but like if you're able to come up with other incentives like a bonus pool or other ways to like reward employees from coming up with efficiencies or innovations, that's like another way to get them motivated and engaged and wanting to stay.
Absolutely. 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 I couldn't agree with you more on this. Hmm. So, Francie, and before that, let me put a scenario to the listeners, and then I'll come back to you, Francie. So, listeners, imagine this: you are a CEO sitting in your Monday leadership meeting, or probably midweek review meeting. You are worried about your sales numbers, but quietly, two of your top performers have one foot out the door. What's that costing you? Think about this, and
Yeah.
then I'll go back to Francie. Francie, how can leaders become more aware of this hidden risks before they show up in the numbers?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So that's basically what people in the business talk about as engagement. So that's kind of an indirect cost as well. So if someone's disengaged, then you have to think about for how long are you paying them for them not to do their job, right? And that's a cost.
Mm.
Uh, so I have seen some things about measuring engagement, measuring disengagement, and there also are. Those are almost like questionnaires that people do often to kind of get a better sense of like what employees are thinking about. Then there also are things called stay interviews. I'm not an expert in this, but the idea is it's almost like the opposite of an exit interview. And it's like connecting with somebody sort of yearly or quarterly, whatever, and just saying, like, what are some things that would make you leave if you were to leave? And it's trying to ask a different way, because I think if you're like in my opinion, if you're leaving, why would you care to make it better? Why would you care to be super honest? That's always a question I have about these exit interviews. Like, I don't feel the need to burn any bridges. I just want to get out of there. But if you're still there, you're more committed to making it better. And I think especially if someone's asking you and they have a track record for listening to you and putting through your changes, I think you're more likely to be really honest with them. So those are the two ideas I have. One of the things that's interesting is that these surveys are wildly valuable and people really discount them. Like, people always want to tell their opinion. They want their opinion heard and they want their opinion responded to. And like just doing things like that and finding what your employee base is asking for, that can change the whole culture of an organization. And so it's really quite easy to do. It's just a question of creating a survey, getting the people to fill it out, and then giving the employees back the aggregate to show them how people responded, because it's really interesting to see. I always find that I do not think like the average person, for better or for worse. Um, so like I know that my opinion is not going to be what everyone else thinks, and like it's really cool to see that, just like in the aggregate. Like if you had 100 people and you ask them 10 questions, like where does like the average person see the change, or what do they think should happen? And I think that's like really cool, and making it something that we can all like work on together as opposed to a problem that only the leaders can solve. And so I think when you open up the ability for employees to like give their feedback, you have better solutions.
Absolutely. Okay, and another quick question. So, in the interest of time, I mean, if you can just uh, give us, I don't know, I mean, but there is a growing belief, Francie, that AI-driven tools and digital platforms, all these psychometric tests and everything, they can replace the need for human-led coaching. So, how do you respond to critics who think coaching is becoming obsolete in the face of rapid tech innovations?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So I hear this all the time. And listen, let me tell you something. I love AI. I'm a huge user of ChatGPT. And like at this point, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not using it for some sort of writing at the very minimum. I love it. Here's the best analogy I have. AI is kind of like learning a language. For sure, you can learn a language on a computer on your own. You can learn Spanish or you can learn Hindi, right? English, no problem. You can definitely learn it. You can memorize it. You can start to read it. You can write in it. But you really can't practice it unless you speak it with native speakers, right? You have to have that like human component to really master the language. You have to like live it. You have to dream it, right? And you have to just be immersed in it. And that's a lot to me what coaching is as well. I think you can learn a ton about yourself on through AI, or you could learn. There's one podcaster I listen to who's been talking about how he's developed a meditation practice using Claude. Basically, like every day we'll say, well, here's what I did with my meditation practice. Can you give me some critiques? Like that's great. That's a great use, right? For something that you previously might have thought should be like a one-on-one with two people. But he has to still do the meditation practice. No, the AI cannot do it for him. And it's the same with speaking with the language. Like you still have to connect with humans and figure out responses in real time. Yes, you can walk around with your phone, but that's a really different way to live a life than actually speaking the language. And so that's a component. But the other thing is in group coaching, it one of the only benefit isn't the cost, right? The splitting the cost by the individuals, but the other benefit is learning about how other people think and learning that the way you think is similar to other people. And guess what? We're all humans. Likely your concerns or fears or whatever are shared by other people. And that ability to understand yourself and to understand others has to be done by the person. You can't outsource that. And the last thing I'll say is I
Mhm.
think the reason people are so excited about AI is it's kind of like it almost feels like it's everything we did as students to like learn something and it's like a shortcut. But you cannot discount the benefits of connecting with humans in learning about life and learning about yourself and learning about the world. And so that's what I would just say. Like, it's just like an education that anyone has in anything. 100% it's great when there are shortcuts for it. But the human side is just you have to do it in order to be excellent in anything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, you have got your library of books and all resources out there, but you still need a teacher to teach you or, translate that information into your language, or maybe with those feelings and, that human touch so that, you can absorb them and you can apply them. So that's really, really
Or another
such a
thing, yeah, another thing I'll even say is there's all this research about how humans learn.
Mhm.
And and it's so interesting because it's things like teaching others. So, like, you know something really well if you can teach other people or, like, reflecting or and talking about it, and so a lot of these things are human social actions,
Yep.
right? And so it's one thing to just, like, absorb it in your brain, but in order to, like, really be excellent, it's not know it, then that's the connection side.
Absolutely. Great, great, Francie. This was really, really eye-opening, informative, really great conversation. Before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you and explore more about Terawatt, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way is probably on our website. It's terawatt.co. terawatt.co. And then, and we have a contact page, so definitely reach out to me there. And then also, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and Terawatt's pretty active on LinkedIn, and that's also a great way to connect.
Lovely. I'll have all the links mentioned in the show notes for our listeners. And Francie, thank you so much for bringing awareness to the entire, dimension of employee turnover and putting importance on this emphasis on this. And thank you for the work you are doing at Terawatt and Terawatt is doing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sana. It's a real pleasure.
So, listeners, if you are listening and realizing that it is time to rethink your approach to retention, head over to Terawatt and also connect with Francie. I'll have all the links and details mentioned in the show notes. And until next time, this is your host, Sana, reminding you that great businesses are not just built alone. It takes the right people, it takes the right values and the resources, processes, the right culture or sometimes the right coach to unlock that next level of success. With that, stay curious and stay connected here on BizBlend. Thank you.